In 2017, Nintendo released the original Switch, and it kind of changed video games for me forever. I was a college student at the time. I believe I would have been in my third or fourth year of school, and having the ability to play games that used to just be home console games on the go, with Nintendo merging their home system and their portable system into one development line and releasing the banger that was Breath of the Wild on launch day, the Switch took over my whole life. I had an ex who said they felt bad for my PS4 Pro when the Switch came out because I was just playing the Switch. And now, in the year 2022, something kind of similar has happened to the Switch in the form of the Valve Steam Deck. Steam Deck was announced last year, and the second it was announced, I was completely enamored with it. It looked like a price to performance ratio that I had never seen before. And honestly, I wasn't sure it was real. I didn't know if they could really do it. Some of my coworkers were making fun of the deck, saying it was just going to be another piece of abandonware, but there was just something about it that intrigued me. And so the second you could reserve it, I fought the system over and over and over again and got my reservation in place. And although I didn't get one on launch day, I did get it a lot earlier than some people did. In between reserving the Steam Deck and when it actually came out, which was a long time, I also happened to pick up the Nintendo Switch OLED. The Switch OLED is a really cool device, but if I had known how great the Steam Deck was, I probably would not have upgraded. I still had my launch Switch, and so there were some more upgrades than just the screen. I also get way better battery life on the Switch. But as I mentioned, part of why the Switch was so cool when it came out is that I was a college student. Now I am a working professional / musician / YouTuber, and I'm basically always home. Because of that, the sacrifices that the Switch makes to be portable don't benefit me as much as they used to, and the choices that Valve made to make the Steam Deck a handheld, but not super portable, are actually really paying off for me in 2022. And because of that work that Valve has done on the Steam Deck, in many ways, it's replaced the Switch for me. Before we get too into this comparison, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you so much to everyone who's already done that. I believe we passed 6,400 subscribers this week, which is unreal. So thank you to everyone who's already done that. I also have music on Spotify and all the streaming services under my name, Dylan Paris. My album's called There's Something Better. Please consider checking that out, and thank you to my Patreon patrons. Okay, let's talk more about the Steam Deck versus the Switch. There are other YouTubers saying that it's essentially the Switch Pro, and in some ways it is, but in others it really isn't. For me, a Switch Pro would take my Nintendo first-party games and make them look better, perform better. And despite how great the Steam Deck is, it really isn't that. I understand that you can kind of emulate and do that sort of thing and maybe get a bit of a performance boost, but it's not quite the same as the rumored Switch Pro we had hoped would come out for years, which is very likely now just going to be a Switch 2 or, my hope, Super Switch. Instead, what the Steam Deck is an amazing, fantastic way to play a huge library of games that were never on the Switch to begin with, and play a bunch of third-party games that are much more performant on the Steam Deck than they are on the Switch. As you very likely know, the Switch OLED is really just a screen bump, and if you had a launch Switch, it gets the improvements of the later versions of the Switch, which had better battery life. There's also a slight improvement in internal storage on the Switch OLED, but I threw in a micro SD real quick with 0.5 TB on there. I threw basically the same 0.5 TB card into the Steam Deck as well, the same model, not the same exact card. I will say that is one area where I do think the Switch is better than the Steam Deck, is that although load times are fine on the external media, maybe I just got a bad card, totally possible, but the install times and update times on the micro SD are really rough on my Steam Deck. I've heard there's a fix for that, but you have to go into desktop mode and do a bunch of stuff I don't want to do. So hopefully Valve will release an update down the line that fixes that, or I just need to upgrade my card, and that's fine too. So the title of this is that the Steam Deck has replaced my Switch, and that is true. A huge part of that is just how much better games run and look on the Steam Deck. Even multi-platform games that are on both, such as Burnout Paradise, which is technically not supported, but totally runs. As long as I don't try to enable any online features, I can definitely run it on the deck. It just plays at twice the frame rate, and it looks better. Could be wrong on the frame rate part, but it definitely looks better. And across the board, that tends to be true. For multi-platform games, they just tend to run a lot better, usually at 60 frames a second, and have way better graphical quality than they do on the Switch, which makes sense. The Switch is running a really old processor. When the Switch came out, the Tegra X1, which is what I believe it runs on, at least a modified version of that, was already a 2-year-old processor. When the Steam Deck came out, there was almost no other device that had the processor it has because it was so advanced. We're now starting to see the Aya Neo 2 and some other devices that have RDNA 2 GPUs and APU setups. Not to get too in the weeds, but I love that stuff. And so now there are starting to be competing devices, but it's still a really different power proposition and a really different philosophy when it comes to making a device. I bought the 256 gig version of the Steam Deck, and so it's the mid-tier. It was $530. You can get a $400 tier that will basically do everything mine does, with just a little bit slower internal storage, but the same screen. On both of these devices, I put a glass screen protector because I don't want scratches on my screens, and they've been fine. If you were specifically comparing the OLED to the Steam Deck, the OLED wins on color reproduction and deep black levels. And in my opinion, the Steam Deck actually wins because of the extra vertical space. I kind of underrated how much I would like a 16:10 screen on a portable versus a 16:9, but that additional vertical space actually does make games feel more immersive, so it's a bit of a trade-off. Your black levels, your contrast ratio, your colors popping are so much better on the OLED Switch, but most people don't have an OLED Switch anyway. So if you're comparing just a basic Switch to the Steam Deck, then I feel like the deck just wins in almost every way. The one area the deck does not necessarily win is if you want a smaller device to pack and take with you. Again, that's not really my use case anymore. I'm using the deck at home, and I actually use it docked quite a bit. And we should talk about docked performance. So with the Switch, when you put it into a dock, it's now accessing AC power, and it boosts the clock speed of its internal processor, which in general gives you a higher video resolution output. With the deck, it's always running at full speed, similar to Apple's M1 architecture. It is not throttling itself on battery. And so when you put it on power, it's essentially accessing the same clock speeds it had before. So you're not getting necessarily a performance boost in the way you would with the Switch. But one of the nice things about the deck is because it has so much power, there's actually a fair bit of overhead. Now, when I got the Steam Deck, it actually didn't have a lot of the features it has now that are baked into the OS. When I wanted to set a specific video resolution output and plug it to my TV, I had to use the desktop mode in order to properly set the output that I wanted. And so every time I plugged it into my TV, I had to switch to desktop mode to make sure I was running at 1080. Because my TV is 4K, and when it first came out, when you plugged it in, it would try to output 4K for everything in the UI, and then it would only output 720p or 800p for the actual video feed of the games. That's all fixed now. And I'm pretty sure that's why they waited to bring out the dock until they'd fix this. But now you can set the standard resolution output for the overall UI, which I think I leave at 1080, and then you can set per game the video output, which I tend to also make 1080. With the internal upscaling of my television, 1080p signals look great. It's totally fine. And in general, it's still a better looking, cleaner image than what the Switch can produce because of the additional power it has. So, while the Switch does get a boost in power when you plug it into the dock, and the Steam Deck doesn't, the Steam Deck is still more performant because the general pool of power it already had is so much better than what the Switch has. When it comes to dock performance, the ease of use of the Switch does win. I have the Pro controller, so I just slide the Switch into the dock, use my Pro controller, and I'm good to go. Games are already set at the right resolution. It's just going to automatically change for the most part. 99.9% of the time, docking the Switch will immediately change the resolution of the game if it has a higher output resolution in docked mode, and you're just getting a cleaner experience. With the deck, it's not quite as smooth yet. So in general, I have to restart games if I want to change the resolution, which means I can't do the same seamless back and forth if I want an increase in video output resolution. I've also seen weird quirks with trying to resume games that I put into sleep when it's plugged into my USB adapter. And for the record, I don't have the official Valve dock. I have a USB adapter that has PD input, multiple USB inputs for controllers, HDMI 2.0 output for 4K 60, and some other stuff, which I originally had for an iPad, but now I use it just for the deck. I'm not sure if the performance would be really different with the dock that Valve makes. My understanding is that it really isn't. It's just a cleaner, nicer looking setup and potentially easier to move, but I don't have a problem with mine. When I plug into my adapter and plug into my TV, I do use a wired DualShock 4. This gives me basically no latency, and it allows me to use the touchpad on the DualShock 4 to do certain things that would require a mouse, which is also really nice. So I do recommend the DualShock 4 if you're using the Steam Deck in docked mode. Where the Switch wins in convenience, the Steam Deck wins in customization, choice, and a huge library. When the deck first came out, it was noted how small the supported pool of games was, although it was increasing exponentially. Now, it does feel like almost any game I want to play on the deck just works. There might be some visual quirks every now and then, you might get an audio hitch, but given what this thing is doing, which is essentially using Linux to run Windows applications, it is amazing. One other thing that's really important that I forgot when I was first filming this, that I know someone will comment about if I don't mention this, is that the Steam Deck has a lot of bugs. Like, things are going to crash and be weird a lot in a way that's not true on the Switch. Sometimes games won't launch and you'll need to restart it. Sometimes it needs to do a really quick, weird little 10 megabyte patch. This stuff is getting better, but it still happens. And that's kind of the trade-off of all of this compatibility, is that there are just times where things are a little weird and you got to restart it and then it works and it's fine. I work in troubleshooting. I've done this for years. I don't mind. If you're looking for the easiest, simplest platform to use, it goes back to what I was saying about, tinkering, but you have to be okay with some bugginess that I would normally not accept in other devices that I am willing to accept with the Steam Deck. That might seem like hypocrisy, but it really is contextual. Anyway, worth noting, if you were going to buy this for a kid, I would say get them a Switch. Don't get them a Steam Deck unless that kid is like probably 8 years or older and loves tinkering with tech. If they're like, I don't care about technical issues, trust them. But if they're like 5 or 6 and they just want to play Mario or something, Switch, and probably a Switch Lite. Okay. The library of games available on the deck, especially the ones I've installed, some of these are on the Switch, but they're all going to run better on the deck, and some of them aren't on the Switch at all. I've been replaying Fallout 3, for example, which looks amazing in handheld because you can 4x SSAA and do all of the max settings when you're plugged into a TV at 1080. It also looks pretty good. If you're a tinkerer, or if you're at least comfortable with technical troubleshooting, I really do think that the deck beats almost every platform on the market now, except for probably the PS4 digital. If you want the best possible gaming experience of modern games, for me, it comes down to the digital PS4, which is only $400 in America, or the Steam Deck, which is $400. You're going to get a really different experience between those two devices, but that is where the fight really is, in my opinion. Even though obviously we're comparing a home console to a handheld that can be docked, we are talking about a similar price range. To me, the Switch isn't even in the race anymore, and that's where I say the deck has replaced it. The only games I want to play on the Switch now are Nintendo games, and I know that's true for a lot of people this whole time, but until really the last year or so, the Switch was my number one choice for most games. Even though I had access to an Xbox Series X and a PS5, for the most part, for cross-platform stuff, I wanted to play it on the Switch. Now it's the deck. And so if someone was to ask me today, should I get a Steam Deck base model or a Switch or Switch OLED, I would tell them the deck. There's almost no situation in which I would recommend the Switch over the deck. The only situation I would recommend it is if you are uncomfortable with any level of emulation and you really want to play Nintendo first-party games. I'm not going to show it in this video because I don't want to get in trouble with the lawyers of my favorite game company of all time, but I will just say that I have the ability to play every Mario Kart that's ever been made on this device, and I basically have them all on the Steam Deck, and it's amazing. Like, generations of Mario Kart. So, although it isn't, officially endorsed as a Nintendo first-party gaming machine, it also kind of is that too if you're willing to mess around. I don't emulate Switch games because I have a Switch. So I just play them on here. But yes, the Steam Deck really has replaced the Switch for me. And it became such an awesome device that I ended up getting a gaming PC, which also then became my editing machine and my music production machine. And so the Steam Deck really set the narrative for technology for me this year, which I talked about a little bit in the What Happened to My Surface Pro video. But yeah, I cannot recommend the Steam Deck enough. I am so excited to see what they do with future hardware. I would love an OLED model. That's kind of like the only thing I feel like it's missing is just a really good screen. Because the screen is fine, but the OLED Switch knocks it out of the park when it comes to vibrancy, contrast, and all that. And the only area, like I said, where the deck screen wins is I just like the vertical space you get with the 16:10 ratio. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week. And like I said, consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. Awesome. I'll catch you soon. Bye.